Hello there, and a very good evening to the London Buddhist Centre's online meditation evening tonight. So you're welcome. My name's Diane Arthur. We're going to be starting in a few minutes, so it's just a nice chance to see who's here and just say hi to whoever's here. And then I'll start the class officially in a bit and introduce our speaker as well, who's going to be Amalayodhin. Okay, so who have we got, Fred, with us tonight?
Okay, so we've got AK who says Namo Buddhaya.
Jai Beam, that's what you have to say when you say that. Yeah.
We've got Mercia.
Yeah.
And who's tuning from Southwark.
Yeah.
We've got Sue Jones from West Wickham.
Hi there, Sue.
We've got Richard Hallows from North Wales.
Oh, Richard, yes. Hi, Richard, welcome. Richard's usually on the Wednesday team, but he's currently in Wales, so nice to see you, Richard.
We've got Gurdeep.
Gurdeep. Hi, Gurdeep, welcome.
Port Tablet.
Yeah. Is anybody here for the first time? Just sort of message in the chat box below. If you're here for the first time tonight, just say hello. Otherwise, feel free to say hello and where you're from. That's really nice to get a sense, so I can imagine you when I'm talking. Yeah, who else is?
So we've also got Sophie from East London.
Sophie, hi Sophie.
We've got Sophie from Haringey.
Two Sophies. Hi there, Sophie.
We've got Maitrijit in India.
Maitrijit, yes, hi there, welcome.
We've got Shay from Bethnal Green.
Shay from Bethnal Green, great. It's amazing to have people from India, Wales, Bethnal Green, all over the place. So yeah, very warm welcome to you. And it has just gone past 7 now, so I think I'll start the class. Maybe a few more people will join, that's okay. So great. So as I say, tonight is the Wednesday evening class, and what we're doing from last week and over the next 4 weeks is exploring metta, so positive emotion. So in a way, we're looking at how can we really cultivate a mind, a consciousness that's just flowing with positivity, a mind that's big enough to hold all of life's emotions, and a mind ultimately big enough to see into the nature of reality. Because you need that. It's very difficult if you want to make any progress in your meditation. You really do need a grounding in metta, in positivity, in loving kindness. Otherwise, your meditation becomes narrow and you can't sort of face life's big questions and in a way go beyond. So we thought it's very important, and it'd be interesting to go through different aspects of metta, loving kindness. Last week we looked at forgiveness, and this week we're going to be looking at particularly compassion. So what happens when a positive mind, a positive mental state sort of looks at compassion, or sort of what happens when a positive mental state comes into contact with suffering? Hopefully compassion arises, and we're going to be sort of exploring that further. So how it's going to work is I'll just take us through meditation just to help us arrive and settle, and then I'll hand over to my good friend Amalayodhin, who will be exploring this theme, taking us deeper into this theme of compassion. Karuna is the Sanskrit name for it, so he'll be looking at compassion and how we work with that in our meditation, on our mind. The world definitely needs that, doesn't it? We need that, the world needs that, so it'll be very interesting. Looking forward to hearing what he has to say. He'll then lead us in a meditation on that theme, and that'll take us up to 8 o'clock. At that point we'll have a break, a tea break, and then we'll come back 5 minutes later and answer any questions you may have from the talk or from your own meditation practice. So we'll answer that together for about 20 minutes or so, and then the evening will finish at 8:30 with a short meditation. So great. So without much further ado, let's just start. Probably all had busy days and whatnot, so let's just start with a meditation to help us arrive, to help us cultivate that positive state of mind that we all want, and that is accessible to us if we put in the effort. So let's give that a go. Okay, good. So you might want to just especially if you're on the screen, if you're sort of quite close to the screen, you might want to just turn the brightness down of the screen, or sort of close your eyes away from the screen so that your eyes can just settle. And if you're in a chair, you're sort of sitting upright with your feet firmly on the floor. If you've got cushions, you're setting yourself up on cushions. Okay, so I'll just let you set up. And as soon as you're set up and ready, you can already feel the weight of the body is sinking down into the ground, into the chair, into the cushions. So maybe starting with a deeper breath. And then just letting the breath breathe naturally. Following the breath down into the belly. A sense of letting go on the out-breath. Drawing in energy on the in-breath. Letting go again on the out-breath. You might start to notice the weight of your shoulders, and you can imagine them dropping down the back. Moving up and down with the breath. Becoming aware now of the stomach, rising and falling with the breath. If there's any tension in the stomach, imagine letting go of that on the out-breath. A sense of the ground taking our weight. At the same time, an upright posture. Noticing any sensations in the heart area. No need to name them, just becoming aware of them, or lack of sensations. As we sit here in awareness. Starting now to gather our awareness and expand it to include our whole body. Becoming now aware of the room. Maybe you can see the glow of the computer with your eyes closed. And when you're ready, opening your eyes and tuning in back to the live stream. Good, so that was good, wasn't it? Even just for a few minutes, just to settle, and you can feel your mind changing. It's very interesting, isn't it? And in a way growing. And there are definitely something going on, isn't it? Something going on there in the mind and the heart. So it'd be interesting to hear more. Now we're going to hand over to Amalayodhin, who's going to explore further this theme of metta, and as I said, what happens to metta when it meets suffering. How can you cultivate compassion and this state of metta? So without much further ado, I'll hand over to Amalayodhin. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you very much for that, Dayanatha. Thank you for leading us through in the meditation as well, and great to have you all here with us. Very warm welcome again to the London Buddhist Centre, particularly from me. My name is Amalayodhin. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this quality, this virtue, this Buddhist virtue of compassion. And the term that we're looking for that's used in this regard is karuna. Karuna. And karuna is one of the metta bhavanas. So if you were tuning in last week, you would have heard of this quality of well-wishing, of friendliness, of love called metta. And one of the aspects of metta is karuna. Now it's often said to be metta when it meets suffering. So when metta or well-wishing or friendliness or love comes across suffering, it's said to be karuna. There's a certain particular quality to it that makes it slightly unusual or unique. It resonates with a person in a certain way when we meet them when they're suffering. Now, as Dayanatha says, it is often usually translated as compassion. I think just to give a little bit of a sort of proviso on that, I think often the way that the English terms that we use for Sanskrit's words pick up a certain resonance that they wouldn't quite mean in the Sanskrit. I think compassion for us often has a slight tinge of pity to it, a slight tinge of condescension maybe, maybe even a certain sentimentality, a certain kind of gooiness. So I think we've got to be careful that when we use compassion in that sense, that we're not talking about something that's pitying or sentimental. Often the ways it's translated is as solidarity. That's often one way of translating it, or empathy. They all have their slight dangers, actually, I think. But you could think of it as more as solidarity. It gives a sense of the connection between human beings and two human beings in that sense as well. It's interesting, there's a teacher, he's based up in Norfolk, a guy called Dharmadeepa, often has these really interesting little insights into things. And we give life stories here in the London Buddhist Centre. We tell our life stories. And he was saying it's very interesting that in all the life stories that he's heard all the way down through the years, he lives in a retreat centre, nobody has ever said, none of the men that went up to that retreat centre, it's a men's retreat centre, have ever said, they treated me with such compassion. And it was really interesting. I thought, no, people don't say that actually, because quite often we don't want to be treated in the way that term often connotates. So really interesting little insight. So I think it's true. I think we do have to be careful about when we're becoming compassionate. Yeah. One of the ways I think that we can look to kind of avoid the sentimentality that comes along with compassion is just to think, well, God, I mean, metta, right? When metta meets suffering, it becomes karuna, right? And suffering it's just there. It's so common, isn't it? The Buddha said that it was just totally intricate to humans' lives, yeah? So there's suffering often very much all around us. Yeah, there's lots of joy and pleasure and happiness as well, but often there's suffering all around. And of course, if we're not suffering, there's lots of potential for suffering in our own lives as well, isn't it? I mean, it's been really interesting. I think one of the things that lockdown has kind of really shown is the precariousness of the lives that we have around us, the precariousness of our happiness, the precariousness of the civilization around us, the society around us. It all gets tested, doesn't it? And I think we start to see that it holds together on very certain conditions. And when those conditions are removed, it can go away. So our health, for example, is very much dependent on a very certain set of conditions, and it can just fall away. Our happiness, our stability, our wealth, all of those things, when taken away, result in suffering, exist on a very precarious basis sometimes, a very kind of movable sort of basis. And so I think we can keep that in mind as well, sometimes that we see suffering out in the world, and often we can think, oh, how clumsy of them to be suffering. But of course, we will suffer. If we don't suffer now, eventually we will, we'll grow older, we'll lose people, we'll lose our good looks, our all the things that are close and meaningful to us, our health, and of course we'll suffer. So of course we need to recognize that in people when we see suffering, the fact, oh no, I can suffer too. Probably we've all suffered to a certain extent in our lives. It's common, isn't it? Hopefully we also have lots of joy and happiness as well, but we can all suffer. So one of the really beautiful stories from the Pali Canon that talks about this quality of karuna, this quality of compassion or solidarity, is the story of Kisagotami. So Kisagotami was a woman. She lived at the time of the Buddha, and as the story goes, Kisagotami lost her only child. Yeah, and she was walking around weeping. Of course, way back in India, childbirth would have been a very of the Buddha's time. Childbirth would have been a very dangerous thing. And there would have lots of stillbirths, but also very dangerous for the women undergoing it as well. And Kisagotami has lost her only child, and she's going around and she's begging for help, and nobody can help her. Of course, her child is dead. Nobody can help her. But this one old man says to her, "No, I know somebody that can help you. The Buddha can help you." So she goes to the Buddha. She takes her dead baby with her, and she says to the Buddha, "Can you bring this baby back to life?" And the Buddha says to Kisagotami, "I can help you. Yes, I can help you, but I need you to go and get some mustard seeds." And Kisagotami says, "Okay, that's fine." And the Buddha says to Kisagotami that it must be from a household that hasn't had any death in it. Yeah, so not a parent, a child, a brother, sister. It must have had no death in it. So off Kisagotami goes to get this mustard seed, and of course she's going around the local villages in India, and she's saying, can you spare any mustard seed? And of course they say, yes, of course we can, and they give her the mustard seed. And then she asks, oh, but one thing, has there been any death in this house? And one by one, of course, the householders say, please don't remind us of our suffering, of our loss. Of course there's been death in this house. There's been parents or children or siblings or however it might be. And one by each house he goes and disappointed away. So eventually, of course, Kisagotami comes to the realization that death is simply a part of human life. Yeah, the Buddha has sent her off to get this mustard seed, this impossible to get from a household that hasn't had any death. And Kisagotami comes to realize that death, even the death of her child, is an intrinsic part of the world. Yeah, an intrinsic part of the universe that we inhabit. And she sits on the outskirts of the forest, and she buries her dead child. And she goes back to the Buddha, and she bows to the Buddha, and says to the Buddha, thank you so much for this teaching. You've made me realize, you've made me see this reality of death. And then Kisagotami joins the Buddha's monastic community, the Sangha, and eventually she becomes enlightened. So I think the story is this really kind of beautiful stories of one of the beautiful stories of the Buddha's compassion, of his empathy with the life around him. But I think also it embodied three, for me, really kind of key aspects of what the Buddha's compassion really embodied. And I think those aspects were wisdom, practicality, and seeing people's potential. So I'll say a little bit more about those three things very briefly. Of course, we don't have too much time to go into it. One thing I was sort of really impressed with by the story when I first heard it was the Buddha's wisdom. It's a risky thing to go and do, isn't it? I certainly wouldn't be going if somebody was to come to me with something as weighty and serious as a dead child, a mother's only dead child dead. You certainly wouldn't be taking such a risky gamble as to send them off to do that. But the Buddha completely saw Kisagotami. He knew what could help her. And I thought that was a really kind of a really good example of the Buddha's wisdom in how he's able to help. Now, of course, we can't always do that. Yeah, we don't have the Buddha's wisdom, so we wouldn't be able to do that in the same sort of way. But I think it's really true to say, isn't it, that compassion, if it's going to be really effective, needs to be wise at the same time. Of course, there's so many examples all around us of compassion that, of course, is well-meaning, but it lacks this quality of wisdom, and often it can do more damage than good. Yeah, we're well-meaning. Of course, it's a sort of child's well-meaningness, isn't it? A child often looks to do good, but of course, and they have a really good intention around it, but they can't quite manage to do it because they don't have the wisdom really to sort of meet the situation. But the Buddha does. He has that wisdom. Now, sometimes, of course, we'll have that wisdom as well. We might have a flash of inspiration in some ways. Those words that can come to us sometimes in those intense moments when a friend really needs us or a relative really needs to us, and the right words come. But of course, we won't always have that, will we? And of course, how could we? It's very, very hard to help people, isn't it? And I think really with compassion, with karuna, what we have to do is start from a point of humility. We have to go, okay, I might not really be able to help this person. What can I do? I might not have those magic words. I might not be able to say the right thing in the right order that kind of turns it around for them. And I think we really have to kind of start from that point of humility, don't we? You have to go, okay, I don't know quite what to do here. we're really so hard to help, aren't we? Human beings, we're so complex. What might help me won't help another person. I'm of a particular shape, and another person will be another particular shape, another particular makeup. I think you have to get to know people really well in order to be able to help them, don't you? It's interesting, Dianatha, who just introduced us earlier today, we live in the same community together, and also we share a room as well. And I think we're still getting to know each other, aren't we? We're sort of 2 years living in a room together, and we're still getting to know each other, and all the kind of little problems that might crop up for us. We really have to kind of just listen to each other and see, okay, maybe what can we do to help? And I think that's really the first key, actually, because I think that's, what the Buddha would have done was seen Kisagotami immediately. We won't do that, but what we can do is just look and take people in. And I think really the important thing to do that with is just to listen to people. Yeah. So if somebody's suffering and they come to us for help, the first thing that we can really do is really listen well. Ask questions, explore what it is for a problem is for a situation for people. And of course, that in itself will help, won't it? When we really get listened to, we have a problem, we really get listened to. The person mightn't offer anything in terms of advice or help after that whatsoever. But the act of listening will just kind of help us feel met, heard in a certain way. And of course, that in itself can be such an act of compassion, of empathy, of solidarity with people, just to listen and to take them in. As opposed to, we might also have the experience, I know I've done this, but we also might have the experience of having advice forced on us. We know that as well. We go to a problem with somebody and they say, oh, you just need to do this. And you sort of think, oh God, right, why did I do that? That there was no point in going to that person because, they haven't really sort of looked to understand the problem at all. And sometimes even if we go, oh no, I don't think that will work, people can get quite kind of aggressive with us and insisting that's the right solution. But of course, we can't do that, can we? People are so unique. So the other thing I think that the Buddha really brought to this story with Kisagotami is he brings an aspect of practicality to it as well. The Buddha wants to help. The Buddha really wants to help Kisagotami, and he has the wisdom to do it. And then he goes about doing it, yeah? So I think that's it as well. So I think, the important first steps for us in terms of really helping people, in terms of reaching out, helping a friend maybe that's suffering, will be to listen, but I think we can go further than that as well. And I think the way that we can go further than that is we can just offer practical help. Yeah. So again, we might not have the wisdom of the Buddha, we might not be able to solve the problem for people, but we can always just offer something of practical help, can't we? I've had this with friends before where I've come, and I've got some issue going on in my life. Maybe you've had this as well. You've got some issue going on in your life, and a friend, they can listen. And they might not be able to solve the problem for you, but what they can do is just help out in some sort of way, can't they? And they offer to do that. They go, okay, I can't help you with this particular issue. Maybe it's a really thorny issue with your boss, but maybe I can just cook a meal for you. Maybe I can come over and help you, and maybe I can do the shopping for you. What's going on? Do you need a bit of help? You're moving house. Maybe I can give you a bit of help with that type of thing. And of course, that's often what we really need, isn't it? We've got this problem that we've kind of got going on. Maybe a loved one is unwell. Maybe we're unwell. Maybe we're not getting on with our boss. Maybe we're going to get fired. Who knows what it is? And of course, we might be able to kind of handle or hold that problem if the rest of our life would just be put on, pause for a bit. If the rest of our life wasn't also kind of pushing in on us at the same time. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, when you hear people say, for example, in lockdown, some of the stories that have come out of lockdown, and it's parents, but they've got the kids to help as well at the same time, and they've got maybe the work that they need dealing with. Maybe they have an elderly parent that's unwell, and you just think, God, so many demands on people from that, and when people are suffering, the rest of their life doesn't get put on pause, do they? And so there's so many demands on us in that way. And so I think what the Buddha does in reaching out and in offering practical help to Kisagotami, we can do as well. we can come in, we can ask people, what can we do for them? We can just ask people, what can we do from them? And that can be such a blessing. I always remember this time I was in a place called Rakshal in India, and I was waiting. I had to go to, I was trying to cross the border into Nepal, and I was sat there and I was freezing cold. I hadn't expected to be cold in India. I probably should have recognised it was going to be cold in Nepal, but it was March, so it was roasting in India. So I thought, I'll just pack for that. Anyway, I was sat there in a station in Rakshal. I had to sit there overnight until the border opened going into Nepal. So I got in at something like midnight, and I had to sit there for the 6 hours until I could go for the border in Rakshal. And I was sat there and I was pretty stressed. I was totally a fish out of water. I'm sat in this Indian train station. It was in Bihar, incredibly poor, in deeply poor part of India. Couldn't go to sleep because, of course, I have to watch my stuff, and it's too cold too anyway. And I'm feeling completely awkward. And I remember there was this guy, and he was a father with his family, and he was sat there around with his family, and he took one look at me and he sort of said, "Oh, here, this guy is not having fun. He's a little bit uncomfortable. He's a bit anxious." And I think he just saw his sons were about my same age. I was maybe about 30 or so at the time, and his sons who were with him were about my same age. And he just talked to me. He just said, "Oh, how you doing?" And I'd lost my voice at the time, and so that was another woe story on top of that. I'd had a throat infection. I'd lost my voice. And he just said, "Oh, do you have anywhere to sleep? Do you want to come and sit on the rug with us? And do you have any antibiotics for that as well?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I do. Thank you." But I just felt so met. It was like, oh God, he's really seen I'm a fish out of water here. I'm totally anxious. And he's engaged with me, and he said, he's offered me help, and I came and sit down on the rug with him, and it was definitely warmer there. And, it was just I was so moved by it. I just thought that, God, that's really nice. And I remember as I walked off to go off to the border, get a taxi to the border the next morning, he just followed me along to the end of the stairs, and he said, "Take care," as I walked down the stairs. And I just thought, God, what a really kind of subtle, but I was just so moved by it at the time. I'm still moved by it now, I have to think, sort of looking back. And it was just this tiny little token of empathy from one human being to another. And it was just enough, it completely turned my mood around. And it was really, I always think back of that actually with fondness. So, yeah. And then I think the third thing that the Buddha does with Kisagotami that I was really noted from the story was he sees Kisagotami's potential. Yeah, so he really does not pity Kisagotami whatsoever in that sort of negative sense of pity. He sees what she's capable of. Yeah. When the Buddha sees Kisagotami, he sees that she is a human being and capable of enlightenment. Yeah, and she did. She became enlightened when she joined. She became a nun, and she eventually became enlightened. And the Buddha sees this. Yeah, so he's not interested in saying, "Oh yes, isn't it terrible? Your child has died. It's awful. Isn't it so bad?" He's not interested in joining her in her particular mental state. Yeah, he wants her to transcend that mental state. He wants her to see the truth of impermanence. He wants her to see the truth of death. Yeah, that's what he wants her. He wants Kisagotami to be liberated from everything that holds her back. He wants for her enlightenment. Yeah, he's not interested in joining in her in being piteous in any way with Kisagotami. And so he sends her off on this, really risky, what would be for anybody else an incredibly risky task. And of course, it works. Kisagotami sees true into this truth of death, of impermanence, and she comes back and she gives her whole life to the Buddha and to enlightenment, and then no doubt to spreading the Buddha's message. Herself engaging in those acts of compassion and spreading the Buddha's message out to others, and maybe even helping others to become enlightened as well. And I think that's really what we need to do. Actually, is we this quality. This sometimes what suffering gets met with is pity, but I don't think it helps. We can join somebody completely in their suffering, can't we? We can sort of like almost kind of like reinforce their story for them, reinforce their suffering for them. Say, oh yes, no, isn't it terrible? It's so bad. But we don't really help people like that, do we? I think really what we have to do if we're going to help somebody is to offer an example. We have to offer an example, and to do that we have to keep one foot almost out of their world. You know, when somebody is really suffering like that, we have to offer a gateway into, if we're practicing karuna and metta and love and wisdom, we have to offer an alternative to somebody, a gateway to somebody out of that despair that, you know, is very common and we all fall into. And one way that we need to do that is just to be a sort of light, you know. So you come and you be positive with people and you help them, and you have sort of one foot in their world, but of course one foot out of their world as well, a hand into their world, looking to sort of help them out. And of course, to do that ourselves, we need to be loving, we need to be positive, we need to be happy, we need to be well-wishing. So we don't benefit people, do we, by joining them in their misery in that sort of sense. We help them by helping them out into something more positive. And I think that's really what we look to do here at the LBC as well. You know, people come to the LBC. I came to Tree Rattan in Dublin all those years ago, and the LBC about 6 years ago here as well. And of course, nobody said, I was a relatively lost young man, you know, quite isolated, quite alienated in lots of ways, lacking in meaning, all of those things. And of course, nobody could save me. You know, I can't come into the centre and be saved. Nobody could do that for me, but what people could do was see my potential. And they went, oh yeah, of course. I mean, Amalayodhin, if he meditates, if he practices ethics, if he practices friendship, he can grow. And people saw my potential. And of course, that was the best thing that anybody could have ever done for me, was see my potential and then put it back to me. Okay, you can grow. Why don't you make an effort? If you make an effort, you will grow. Now, and that's exactly what I needed. You know, that really was the thing that I needed. So I think that's what we have to do as well, is we see people's potential, we reach into their world if people are suffering, and then we offer them a handout by in ourselves being loving, friendly, all of those things. And I think that's what we do here at the LBC. We sort of help people to help themselves in a lot of ways. And that's, of course, that's all that you can do with people, is to help people to help themselves, isn't it? So we're going to do a little bit of meditation, and we'll do about, I think we have about time for about 15 minutes or so, isn't it? We're about 5 to is we'll go for a break, and we'll go at on the hour. So we'll do about 20 minutes of meditation. And what I want people to do is we're going to do a little bit of metta bhavana. So what I want people to do is, first of all, we're going to send well-wishing towards ourselves. And we're, of course, going to develop well-wishing towards ourselves in all the ways that we do that. Yeah. So you can just bring to mind the reflection that I am well-wishing. You know, I'm well-wishing towards myself. We can bring that reflection to mind. Of course, we wouldn't be here now if we weren't well-wishing towards ourselves. So we can bring that to mind. And then we can bring to mind actually somebody that's suffering at the moment. You can bring to mind somebody that you know that's not having an easy time of it at the moment. There's lots of us not having an easy time of it at the moment. So we can bring to mind somebody that you know that's not. And then you can recognize, in the same way that, you know, we don't want to suffer, that person doesn't want to suffer either. And we can send well-wishing to them, friendliness, solidarity to them on that basis. Yeah, we don't want to suffer. This person is suffering, and of course they don't want to suffer either. So we can share in that wish for them. And then we can bring to mind all living beings whatsoever as well. So we'll do 3 stages. So we'll go ourselves, somebody we know who's suffering, then all living beings whatsoever. And we can bring to mind not only the joy that exists in all the world, because there's lots of joy amidst the suffering, but also we can bring to mind the suffering as well. And that same reflection, just as we don't want to suffer, others don't want to suffer either. And so we can share in that well-wishing towards them. Okay, so why don't we set ourselves up for meditation? So just bringing our awareness down to the point that our legs connect with the ground, our weight connects with the ground and the cushion. So connecting with a sense of stability. We can just take a moment as well to check for any tension in our body. Yeah, so just relaxing any tension in our body. So you might find your shoulders up around your ears, or holding your gut, or holding your thighs. So just relaxing all of that. And then particularly in this meditation, we're going to stay connected with the heart area, the head, the chest and the heart area. So that's where we often feel metta and where we feel karuna. It's around the chest and the heart. So just keeping a connection with that area. Maintaining awareness of that area. We can just bring to mind that we are self-cherishing. We wish ourselves well. And this is totally natural and healthy. So just bringing to mind that we do wish the best for ourselves. And we act that out in lots of different ways. We've come here tonight. We feed ourselves. We take care of ourselves. So just bringing to mind that fact. Maintaining an awareness of the chest and the heart area. And then moving on to the second stage, we can bring to mind somebody who is suffering. And then you're sitting with that person for a moment. And we can reflect, just as I am well-wishing, so too are they. Just as I wish to be free from suffering, so too do they. May they be free from suffering. And moving on to the third stage, we bring to mind all living beings. And first, for a moment, we can just bring to mind all the joy and goodness amongst all those living beings. The acts of courage, friendship, generosity. But so too, weaved into that, there is heartache, loss, death, suffering. And can we respond to that with well-wishing? May all beings be well and free from suffering. And then dropping all effort, we're making the meditation. Just sitting for a moment. And when we're ready, we can open our eyes and bring the meditation to a close. Okay, very good. So what we'll do now is we'll just take a 5-minute break. You can have a leg stretch or get a cup of tea or water, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. And myself and Dianatha will ask any questions that you have on the topic of Karana. So do go put them into the chat box, and our tech team here will have them ready for us, and then we'll do our very best to answer them. So see you in 5 minutes.
Okay, good. So now you can see and hear us, hopefully. So great. So hope you had a nice tea break, the obligatory tea break after meditation. So thanks very much, Amalayodhin, for what I thought was a very engaging talk, actually. Really lovely to be exemplified by the story of the Buddha, Kisagotami, and then drawing out those three aspects, the wisdom, the practicality, and the potential, from the story. So I'd be quite interested to know if you've got any questions, from the talk or from your own meditation practice, and we'll try and answer them between us. So please do write them in the chat box. And I think we've got a few questions already. So Fred,
Yes.
You fire away.
Okay, so Oliver has asked, what do you think the Buddha would have done if the woman had been able to find a house with no deaths? And the second part of that question is also what to do about people who like to wallow in their own suffering.
Okay, good. So Amalayodhin, do you want to take that one? We'll repeat the question so you can hear it, and then take it away.
So there's two parts to the question. Oliver was asking what the Buddha would have done had Kisagotami found a household where there was no deaths, and what to do with people who wallow in their suffering. The first question is a good one. I think probably that the story has been set up so that Kisagotami, of course, couldn't have found a household with no deaths. So it'd be a good question if there had been. I mean, it's interesting. Of course, an Indian household would have stayed probably within the family. Medieval India would have stayed within the family for generations. So, of course, there was going to be deaths. That was the nature of the errands that the Buddha had sent Kisagotami out on. So there was always going to be deaths there, I think. But also their stories are analogies, aren't they? And they kind of bring out a lesson for us as well. So we don't need to think of them too literally either. They're sort of there as myths and stories and ways of kind of explaining a theme or an idea to us. Yeah, and so this issue of people who wallow in their suffering. I mean, I've done that. I've wallowed in my suffering. I don't know if other people have wallowed in their suffering. I've definitely done it. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because sometimes you really kind of have to. Well, obviously patience is an important virtue as well, isn't it, as well? But sometimes you might have to just really put it up to people, okay, how are you going to help yourself in this situation? You've listened, you've given practical help, you've done all those things. How, you can ask, how are you going to help yourself in this situation? I think one of the things of just listening to people is you help them figure out a way that they can go about things themselves, can't you? When you sit down and listen to somebody, it's not always, or really even most of the time, with an aim to actually find a way of kind of figuring out how to help them. You figure that you help them to figure out how they help themselves. That's the aim with listening, I think. And you might have to, if you know the person well, you might have to be a bit challenging and go, okay, how are you going to help yourself here? What are you going to do to make things better? Sometimes when we get mired in suffering, we become very passive, don't we? I can become passive. Something happens to me, and all of a sudden I become like a bunny in headlights or something like that. And of course, okay for a moment, but you have to start to get going. You have to get your energy flowing again and start to help yourself. So. It's tricky, isn't it? But I think you've got to sort of support people to kind of help themselves a bit. What do you think, Diana?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, definitely. It's the wallowing itself is the negative mental state, isn't it? And so you can get stuck in that and think you'll never get out of it. But of course, that's what, just by practicing this practice, you're cultivating a positive mental state, and just the intention of doing that will sort of give you, hopefully, the confidence that you can get out of that state, and then suddenly you think, oh yeah, of course I can. Right, why was I wallowing? Right, that's what I mean. So it's just sort of applying yourself to the practice, isn't it? I think, even if it feels like it's not going to work, whatever, you just do the practice, and then
that's right.
out of that something something comes. Yeah.
I think that's it, isn't it? Like when we wallow in those negative mental states, it's because we've lost faith that actually we can do something for ourselves in that situation. It's like we think, oh, anything we do, it's just useless. There's no point. Like, what's the point in doing that?
I reckon.
And we all do that, don't we? It's sort of like, so we have to be sort of reminded, no, actually, you can, go about cultivating positive behaviors, skillful actions. And you'll help yourself. It will happen. It might be slow, but it will happen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Great. Thanks. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, so we've got a few more.
Good.
There's a good follow-on from that, which is Mercer asking, can suffering be viewed as something beneficial, like sandpaper for our rougher edges?
Shall I give that a go?
Yeah. Okay. Good question.
So good question.
Yeah.
So can suffering be viewed as beneficial, like sandpaper for our rough edges? That was the question. So thanks, Mercia. Yes, I mean, you've got to be careful, haven't you? Because you're not trying to glorify suffering or sort of, in a way, sort of belittle it. You know, people are suffering and that is bad, and we want to sort of move away from that. And at the same time, I think, my own teacher, Paramabandhu, who ordained me, does say something similar to me. Actually, I often have like a sore throat because I've got some indigestion and things like that. You don't need to go into that now. a sore throat. And anyway, he says that's in a way can be your guide, and he even says your bodhisattva, because sometimes, which means a sort of figure that's trying to help you. Because if I was to sort of reflect on that suffering, I'd be able to see that, life does include suffering, and that unless I sort of see that, then I can't grow and I can't really take life by the horns, if you sort of mean, unless I include that suffering. So I think what most of us want to do is try and like completely not see any suffering. When we all have suffering to some extent. I mean, we have to, we're changing all the time. You can never hold on to our youth or our possessions or whatever. Everything's changing. So there's always going to be some degree of suffering. And I think what the Buddha's saying is, don't wallow in your suffering. It's not being like via negativa. He's just trying to say, no. There's pleasure in life, but can you see there's also suffering? We need to be aware of that. Otherwise, how can we approach life if we just sort of pretend it's not there? You probably know people, or I certainly do, that you can see they're just sort of really trying to hold any suffering at bay and pretend everything's okay. And you can see they're just sort of living on the surface, and any moment they're sort of going to break, because they've not really addressed or looked at suffering. And I think when you can look at suffering, it's very liberating, because first of all, it's not as bad as you think it is, and it's sort of a way into much, much deeper reflections, thoughts, mental states. So, as long as we're in a positive mental state when we're reflecting on suffering as much as we can be, then it can be very positive. I guess the danger is you don't want to overdwell in negativity around it, but you do need to look at it. That's my point.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's a very good point. I think a very good question as well. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, suffering, partly I think we have a slightly Christian idea sometimes in the West of suffering in and of itself being redemptive. My sense is that probably it comes from Christ suffering on the cross, redeeming us as human beings. And I think probably we have a mythical kind of connection or a sense of kind of suffering in and of itself being worthwhile. I definitely used to think that. I mean, I'd suffer in my late teens, in my early 20s. I had quite bad depression. And the way I always used to think of it was it was somehow would be sort of redemptive or character forming or something like that. I don't think that was true. I think suffering can be, I think it's one of those ideas that just isn't true, that one actually. But I do think there is potential in suffering. I think suffering actually can be a method of growing if we use it as such, but we have to approach it in a particular type of way if it's going to be useful and growthful in that kind of way. particularly I think this idea of sort of it connecting, how it connects us with other human beings. You know, if we're suffering, we can connect with other human beings on that basis, can't we? You go, and we suffer, other people suffer. That sort of pops us out of our bubble and draws us closer to other people, and can cultivate that love as well, and also a sense of kind of healthy disillusionment with us as a project that always needs to be happy and always needs to be free from suffering. We don't really, you know, we can just sort of, we will have mixes of happiness and suffering in our own lives. And I think what's important through all of that is that we connect with other people, and we maintain a level of positivity through that. So really, really good question. I think the answer is it depends. You have to use suffering as a method of growing by approaching it in a particular way. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mercia. Okay, good. So, we've got time for a few more. So.
Okay, yeah, we've got a few more questions.
Okay, good.
So we've had some good questions so far. There's a question from Cav saying, can you speak a little about compassion in terms of forgiving another for the suffering they have caused you?
Okay. Yeah, so Fred said, Kat, so thank you, Kat. So can you think of compassion in terms of forgiving someone else for the hurt they've caused you? So if somebody's caused you hurt, can you have compassion towards them in terms of forgiveness? Which is, actually, we explored that last week as well, so we can definitely go over that again. Do you want to... Anything else you want to say? So.
I mean, yeah, absolutely, can't we? It's sort of when somebody causes us harm, to forgive is such a victory, isn't it? It's such a big thing to do. You know, when people describe being the bigger person, to forgive in that way is really it's such a victory, and it's very interesting. There's a teacher up in Padmaloka, the retreat centre up in Norwich, Padmavajra, and he talks about forgiveness. He says, when you forgive somebody, you forgive the world. And I always really liked that line. It was like, because that's exactly what you do, isn't it? When you forgive somebody for harming you, you accept the fact that we live in a world where people will do that to us. People will harm us. That's it. There's no point fighting against that, is there? It's sort of like, okay, that's the world we live in. Are we going to be at loggerheads with the world, or can we be at peace with the world? So to forgive that person of the harm they've caused us is, of course, not just to be at peace and to forgive them, be at peace with them, but is also to be at peace with the world around us, reality even as such, and to forgive, if you want to use that sort of term, reality. And of course we have to do that, don't we? We can't pick a fight with the world, we won't win. So yeah, I think forgiveness is really can be a great opportunity for practice.
Yeah, that's really true, isn't it? Kat was talking about in terms of compassion as well, which I think is interesting. In your talk, you said it's when metta meets suffering, and often when someone's harmed us, we don't really think about that person suffering. We often just think of them as the person that's harmed us, and we're suffering. But of course they're probably suffering as well, which might have been why they've harmed us in the first place, or they'll have a degree of suffering. So metta can give you that empathy, so that you can forgive. I think, because it gives you a bigger perspective. That's what we're trying to get to in Buddhism, aren't we? Ultimately, the biggest perspective. That's what the Buddha represents. And of course, a bit like when you see children fighting. I went for dinner last night with my cousins, and they had 2 children, and they were fighting, and over something very, very small, about who's going to have the pudding, sort of thing.
It's no small matter, really.
No, pudding, actually, that's true, fair enough. Yeah. And you just wanted to say, just share it, guys. Come on, share it. You both can have it. It's a massive portion. So it's like, as an adult, from an adult perspective, you think it's just really simple. Just share it. And they were sort of fighting. And of course, from the Buddha's perspective, it'd be the same, like looking at us fighting or not forgiving, or he'd be like, you don't need to be in those negative mental states. The world's much bigger than that. Bring compassion towards it, like you were saying, towards each other, and I think that's definitely the way out. And then it's freedom. It's freeing, isn't it? Because if you're holding a grudge, you yourself are in a sort of negative state, and you're obsessed with it, and you're small, and as soon as, like I think you just said it before as well, it's very freeing to forgive and be in a positive mental state. It's liberating. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Fred. Yeah, should we have I think we've got time for maybe one or two more.
Okay, yeah, there's definitely two more we could go for.
Yeah, let's go for two more.
Okay, so Sue has asked, am I right in thinking that the Buddha was originally married with a child? And do you suppose he looked back with compassion?
Looked back with compassion in terms of, I'm not sure I quite get the question, Sue, but maybe if I can see if I can put one to it. Sue was asking, do we know that the Buddha at one point had a child, and then was married with a child, and I think maybe what Sue's asking is, on that basis, having had a child himself, did he, from his own experience of knowing what it was to have a child, then meet Kisagotami with a sense of what it was her loss was? Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, my sense of it is that, I mean, the Buddha's enlightened experience goes so far beyond our normal everyday experience of, because I suppose what we're talking about there is a sense of empathy, isn't it? I know what it's like to have a child. Kisagotami has lost a child, and I can kind of resonate with that loss, if you know what I mean. I can feel that loss, and that's a very good reflection to bring to mind. I'm not so sure that the Buddha would have needed that, to be honest. I mean, the Buddha might not, if the Buddha didn't have a child, for example, I think he could have had that same sort of response to Kisagotami. It was really the Buddha's wisdom that saw the answer to Kisagotami's problem. But in our own lives we can do that, can't we? We can reflect back on, well, what's it like, when we behave badly, for example. We might have been on the other end of that sort of behaviour at one point and gone, well, what did that feel like, or maybe we've got a bit inflated with ourselves. Maybe we're doing really well and we've forgotten about the suffering that's around us, and we can't connect with people anymore, and we think that it doesn't apply to us. Well, maybe we just need to remember a little bit about a time that it did. So I think from our own perspectives, yes, we can bring to mind our own experiences of suffering or connection or love that we have with people, what it would be like to lose them, in order to have compassion or karuna for other people.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Thanks, yeah. Does that answer the question?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, good, thanks, thank you. Okay, good. So, one more question.
So there was one for Amalayodhin. Well, I suppose it's for both of you, of course, but it's Sophie asked, so she said, you spoke of feeling lost and alienated as a young man. How has Buddhism helped with those feelings? And have you noticed changes in your life now? Or is it more that you feel, or is the Buddhist path a more a sort of a way of feeling the potential for change? Yeah, so she said, are the changes apparent to you, or is the Buddhist path more of a striving to change?
Good questions again. Was it Sophie?
Sophie?
So Sophie has asked, as I was talking about being a sort of lost and alienated as a young man, have I experienced that changing? What has the Buddhist path done for me in that sense? Am I right in saying, yeah? And then also, have I actually changed, or have I just sort of experienced the potential for change? Both really good questions. And well, I think probably what the Buddhist path, and especially as shown by Bhante Sangharakshita, the man who founded the movement, has really given me is particularly a community of people also on this path. And I think that's really important. If we're going to change, we need a community of people around us doing that as well with us, don't we? Sort of like we need friends on that path. And I'm very blessed to live upstairs with a community of men and have very good friendships with Dianatha and with others up there as well. And that's been a total blessing to me. So, of course, we can't have that so much as the moment we're sort of physically isolated from each other, but we will get back to normality. And so eventually one day I'd really encourage people to come in and come to the centre and get to know people here. We will get back to that. But of course at the moment we have to just sort of create that sense of community as best as we can. And then on the question of has it been change or seeing the potential for change, I can definitely 100% say I've changed. I walked into the Dublin Buddhist Centre about 10 years ago, and really it was not a pretty sight, it must be said. And I've got so much, I've been gifted so much by the Buddhist path, and particularly here by the LBC, and a sense of meaning and connection, friendships, a way out into more positive mental states, a way into liberation, all of those things, a connection with beauty, all of those things. Really, I think I've been given my life back in a certain sort of way by the Buddhist path. It's totally revolutionary when you undertake it, and I would say should be undertaken with caution on that basis, because it is totally revolutionary. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you have changed. No, I think that's the beautiful thing. You live in a community and you can see your friends change. Yeah. You know, well, I mean, when I say change, I mean grow for the better. You know, become more themselves, more kinder, more aware, more reflective, and you can see that in each other. When as I say, we live in the same community, sharing a room. I've seen that in you. Hopefully, you've seen that in me. I don't over the years, so you can sort of see it in each other, and sometimes you don't always recognise it in yourself, because you habituate to your present moment. But definitely, your friends can see it, and that's why we have friendships so we can sort of talk about our practice to each other, and it's great. It is wonderful that. I definitely feel the same. That it's helped me grow into in a way more of my potential. It's a long way to go still, but it's sort of more of my potential. It's not like I've changed into someone else. It's sort of like I've grown more into my potential, and then there's a long way to go into the full potential. Thank you. All right, good. So I think thank you for those questions. So what we'll do in a minute is just end with a meditation, just to help us sort of relax before we go back into our lives. Before I do that, I just wanted to say one thing. So, we do rely on donations to run these classes. It's very important for us, especially at the moment. We've lost a lot of income from not having face-to-face classes. And everything we do here is based on generosity anyway, so you are very welcome to come and listen free. But if you can give money to support us, we'd really appreciate that. It just helps us run the tech, run the centre. We can't do that without that. So if you do feel moved to give, we'd appreciate that. It's actually a good way of actually putting a positive mental state into action, to benefit you, benefit us, benefit the world. So we would really appreciate if you could give. Thank you very much if you already have as well. And okay, so let's just set ourselves up for it. It'll be about a 3-minute breathing space meditation. So just gathering our awareness to include our whole body breathing. Turning inwards. And all we have to do is follow the breath as it calms the body on the out-breath. It energizes on the in-breath. Starting to broaden our awareness to include our whole body sitting here at this moment, at this time. Noticing any resistances to getting up or the next thing we have to do. And finally becoming aware of the sounds in the room. Sense of just sitting, doing nothing. And when you're ready, opening your eyes, coming back to the room. Okay, very good. So yeah, thank you very much, Amalayodhin, for a wonderful talk, and it's been very nice doing it with you. And thank you very much for coming and listening. I hope it's been helpful, and we're going to be doing this, as I say, every Wednesday, exploring the theme further, metta further. So do feel free to join you next Wednesday if you can, same time, same place, so to speak. And thank you to the tech team as well for your help. That's really good. And so, great. Have a good week.
Great.
See you next time. Thank you very much.
See you, folks. Take care. Bye now.
I meant to blow out the candles now, and they won't.